Hello and welcome back to this week's Tech Tip Tuesday. This week we are going to take a look at the request for quote functionality within the quote entry screen. The purpose of the request for quote form is to create and maintain RFQs sent to vendors to receive current pricing on materials and services, as well as find out when you can expect delivery from your vendors. I am accessing quote entry and pulling up quote 1008 that I have created prior to you joining this call to save us a little time. Under the Part Details tab, you will see a subcategory called Materials. I do want to point out that we have a material that we have not purchased in the past that is a miscellaneous material on this quote. You'll note that there is no cost here. Because this quote includes a material that I have not purchased in the past, I will certainly need to put together an RFQ for this material. Why? Because I'm not in the business of giving materials away. I want to make sure all my material costs are covered in my quote so I don't have any forgotten material costs digging into my profit margins. To put together an RFQ within the quote functionality, you will be under the Part Details tab. You will access the RFQ subcategory. Under the RFQ subcategory, there is a drop-down menu that allows you to auto-number your RFQ. You'll select the auto-number and hit Tab 2 times to initiate the fields below. The first tab, the General tab, allows us to build out a list of our different vendors. To build out a new list, you'll come over to the Add Vendor button on the right-hand side, which pulls up your vendor selection window. From here, you will select the various vendors that you want to see a quote from on this material. I have added the 3 vendors that I want to see the quote from and hit OK to put them in the field below, telling JobBOSS that these are the 3 vendors I want to see quotes from. I will then jump over to my Details tab where I can include the material that I want to see the quote on. I am going to select the magnifying glass lookup tool next to the item to pull up my requirement selection window. You'll note that your quote number is already filled out in the quote field, so all you'll have to do is simply hit the Show List button, which will bring up all of the materials and services on this quote. I am going to be adding the stud clinch, since this is the miscellaneous material that's on this quote, by highlighting it and either hitting this button here, or I can double click to add it to the right hand side and hit the OK button to tell JobBOSS this is the material we want to see an RFQ on. You'll note that the 2 different quantities from the quote have been added, telling JobBOSS that, or rather telling our vendor that we want to see a quote at 500 and 700. Below there are various windows and fields that you can fill out that pertain to this specific RFQ. I am going to move over to the vendor quotes tab where I can come and I can put in all of my received quotes from my vendors. In order to do that, I will access the button on the right hand side that is called Receive Quote. By selecting the Receive Quote button, it brings up my vendor response window. From there, I will select from the vendor drop-down menu which vendor has sent me back my quote. By selecting that vendor, I am now able to put in what their unit price is, or if they didn't send me a quote, I would simply select the No Quote checkbox here, indicating that they did not send back a quote. I also have the option to put in their lead days so I can track when the first delivery will be. So we will say that this vendor is going to send this over at $1 for 500 and $1.25 for 700. Or $1.22 rather. Now that might be a little bit backwards. Usually my guess is you'll be paying less for more, but this is just an example. So I'm going to now hit the OK button, and JobBOSS will lay out below the response from that vendor. Now I can come through and do that for the remaining vendors. We don't have time to go through every one of them today, so I'll just select the next vendor, and I will put in $1.20 for them for the quantity of 500, and we'll say they're at $1.15 for 700, and we'll say that they are on 3 lead days, so that means it's going to take 3 lead days from when they get my purchase order to get it into my shop so I can use it on my job. I'm going to hit the OK button to receive that quote into my system. The other option that I have, or the other functionality I can do now, is I can award whatever vendor I want. So now that I have some vendor responses here, I might win this quote at 700, and if I do, I want Barry Bearing to be my vendor, so I'm going to highlight over Barry Bearing and come to the top where my star just became initiated and select the award response button here, and you'll see that my awarded vendor is Barry Bearing. Now that I've awarded Barry Bearing as my vendor, I can come back to my materials subcategory, go down to my miscellaneous material, and note that you now have a cost in the system for that material. Now that I've piqued your curiosity about how you can start using the RFQ functionality within your company, you can visit the JobBOSS customer portal to view our on-demand video further detailing the step-by-step process for using the RFQ functionality within JobBOSS. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's Tech Tip Tuesday. We'll catch you next week.